Okay, so moving on to secondary storage devices. Okay, so over here it says secondary storage devices refer to storage devices that serve as an addition to the computer's primary storage. Okay, since they always consist of non-volatile memory, so by now you should be knowing what we mean by non-volatile. Non-volatile means it does not lose any data when the power is turned off. So whatever you stored in your hard disk, whatever you store in your CD, whatever you store in a pen drive, they are non-volatile. They will remain even when there is no power. Okay, so you switch off your computer, you switch on your computer again, the data that you stored in your hard disk will still remain. Okay, so they allow users to permanently store data on them. Okay, so secondary storage are of many types. Okay, so you have optical disk, you have magnetic disk or hard disk, and you have flash memory. Okay, there are many types, but I have listed only 3 over here. Okay, because these 3 are what's being used in today's world. Okay, now there is an important part as well. Storage media. When I say storage media, I'm referring to the technology that is used to store data. Is it clear? When I say storage media, I'm referring to the technology. Okay. Now we also have another word, which is storage device. When I say storage device, I'm referring to the device that stores the data. So an example, when I say pen drive, a pen drive is a storage device. Okay. A pen drive is a storage device. Now, what technology is a pen drive using to store data? It uses flash memory. Is it clear? So flash memory is the storage media. Okay, let's give another example. So if you talk about CD, DVD, Blu-ray, CDs, DVDs, Blu-rays, these are storage devices. A CD is a storage device. You store data on a CD. You store data on a DVD. Now, what is the technology that a CD or DVD uses to store data? The technology is optical discs. Okay, so optical disc becomes the storage media. Okay, optical disc will become the storage media. Okay, so just keep in mind the difference between those 2 words, because in certain past papers they use these words. They say list 3 types of storage media or list 3 types of storage devices. So then you should be able to understand what you need to talk about it. Okay, right. Moving on to our first secondary storage, which is optical discs. Okay, so optical disk is any computer disk that uses optical storage techniques. So optical storage techniques means it uses light, it uses laser beams to store data and retrieve data. So we say read and write data. Okay, it is a computer storage disk that stores data digitally and uses laser beams transmitted from a laser head mounted on an optical disk drive to read and write data. Okay, so if I was to show you a CD drive example over here, I can just put a picture of a CD drive. Okay, so for example, you can see this is what we call a CD drive. Okay, so you place your CD into this, your CD or DVD, whatever you place into this, and then this unit will be used to read the data that is stored in your CD. Okay. So there are 3 types of optical discs. So you have compact disc, DVD, and Blu-ray. Okay. Now these optical discs can be it can be either read only. So read only means you can only change the data once. Okay. So if you have a CD-R, which means compact disc read only, or you have a DVD-R, or you have a Blu-ray R, it means the data on that particular disk can only be changed once. Only once you can make changes to it. Thereafter, you cannot make any changes to it. Okay. However, we also have something called rewritable. So if you have CD RW, DVD RW, Blu-ray RW, on the CD it would be mentioned. If it is an RW optical disc, it means rewritable, which means you can make changes as much as you want. Okay, you can keep modifying the data that is stored on that disk. Okay, right. Now, if you look at a compact disk, if you look at a CD, it has a storage capacity of 700 MB. It has a read-write speed of about 150 kilobytes per second. So normally we use it for storing small sized files. Okay. So like, for example, Word documents, Excel, what do you call spreadsheets, presentations, you would use a CD. Okay. Then we have DVD. Okay. So it has a much higher storage capacity, which is 4.7 GB. It has a much higher read-write speed. Is it clear? So DVDs are normally used for mid-sized files such as software setups, videos, images. Okay. And then finally, we have, oh, I made a mistake here. It shouldn't be compact. It should simply be Blu-ray. Okay, so next I have Blu-ray. So Blu-ray has a storage capacity of 25 GB, much higher. It has a read-write speed of 54 Mbps, which is quite fast. And it can be used for storing large size files such as HD movies, high quality movies, high definition movies, and large software setups. So certain games and all, which are more than 5 GB in size, you would use a Blu-ray disc to store that game setup. Okay. So I hope you all know the differences between the three types of CDs and the formats, read-only and rewritable. Yes, in today's world, CDs are not at all popular, okay, rarely used, but still your textbook expects you to know about it, okay? Right. Next, we move on to magnetic discs, okay? So we just completed optical disc, okay? We completed our first secondary storage, and now we move on to the second one, which is magnetic disk, or you can refer to them as hard disks. Okay. So hard disks are made up of many concentric platters. Okay. So platters are like round shaped plates, metal plates. Okay. As you can see over here, guys, these are your platters. So a hard disk or a magnetic disk will have multiple platters. Okay. The more platters, the more data that can be stored. Okay, so the more the number of platters, the more those circular metal platters, the more data that can be stored. Okay, then we have something called a spindle. So over here in the middle, can you see we have something called a spindle? This spindle is responsive, is its function is to rotate the platters. Okay, so when this spindle turns, the platters will also turn. So something very important here to know is how fast is the spindle rotating at? Okay, so certain hard disks, when you purchase it in the specifications, I would say the spindle has this much of a speed. Okay, RPM, revolutions per minute. How many revolutions per minute? Some users who expect the hard disk to work at a good speed will check that. Okay, what is the speed of the spindle? How many RPMs? I mean, what is its RPM? Okay. Then next we have something called a read-write head. Okay, so read-write head, can you see where my cursor is? So there's a read-write head that will read data from each platter. Okay, so it moves on an arm across tracks on the platter to read and write data. So when you want to read data and when you want to write data to the platters, this arm over here will do that function for you. Okay, hard disks are generally bulky in size and heavy in weight. Okay, I hope you guys have physically lifted a hard disk. Okay, you would notice it's bulky and it's heavy. It's on the heavy side. Okay, right. Moving on to our next. So now we have completed optical, we have completed magnetic, and now we move on to our final one, which is flash memory. Okay. So when we come to flash memory is used in most modern day storage devices. So nowadays, most devices, most smartphones, most of the latest laptops, especially the MacBooks, when you look at some of the desktop that come all in one, most of them are using flash memory, not hard disk, not magnetic disks. Okay. Why? I'm about to tell you. Okay. So flash memory is extremely beneficial because it has a very high read-write speed. So number one, a good reason to get a flash memory device is the fact that it has a very high read-write speed. So accessing data happens very, very fast. Okay. Next, it's very, very slim in size and very light in weight. Okay. So now you understand why nowadays laptops are so slim and so light in weight, because they are using flash memory. They are not using the bulky hard disk. Okay. It consumes a very small amount of electricity, so it's ideal to be used in devices that run on batteries, such as a laptop. Okay, so devices like laptops and all, ideal for fixing a flash memory because flash memory storage devices do not consume a lot of electricity. Okay, it has no moving parts, so it's less prone to physical damages. Okay, so your laptop, you can move it this way, that way, you can put it in your bag, take it out, all that can happen. And the chances of your flash memory storage device being affected is very, very minimal because it has no moving parts. It's just one unit, that's it. Okay. However, if you look at a hard disk, can you see it has multiple parts inside it? So if you shake your device too hard, the internal components can get damaged. Okay. Right. Storage devices, example of devices that use flash memory. You have memory cards, or you can call them SD cards, or you have pen drives, and you have solid state drives, SSDs. Okay, we will talk about each of them one by one. Okay. Right. So if you have to look at SD cards or memory cards, so these are used in digital devices such as smartphones, tablets, and cameras. Okay. So you will have a slot to insert your card, but nowadays most smartphones do not allow you to put a memory card. You have to use whatever memory they have given you. But there are certain devices, certain laptops that allow you to, certain tabs, for example, that allow you to connect a memory card into it. Okay. And especially if you're using a laptop, if you're using a camera, a digital camera, there would be a slot for you to put a memory card so that your photos can be stored. Okay. Now, these memory cards can also be plugged into something called a memory card reader on a laptop or desktop. So if you want to read the data that is there on this memory card, you can simply connect it to a memory card reader. Most laptops come with an inbuilt memory card reader. Desktops may not have it, so you may have to purchase a gadget, okay, a USB memory card reader, and then you'll have to put the memory card into that reader and then connect that to your computer. Okay. So that's what we call SD card or memory card. Next, we have pen drives. So pen drives are extremely small and light portable storage devices. Pen drive should be connected to a USB port. Okay, like you can see in this image, it has to be connected to a USB port in order to read and write data. Okay. Then finally, we have solid state drives. Okay. So solid state drives are being used like hard disks. Okay. They have a large memory capacity compared to a pen drive or a memory card. Okay. But they are extremely expensive. Okay. You can say SSDs are higher in cost when compared to HDDs. Okay. So I think this image is blocking it a little bit. Okay, so one major disadvantage of solid state drive is it's much more expensive when compared to a hard disk drive. Okay, so SSDs are extremely slim in size and light in weight. So for example, if you look at this MacBook, okay, the reason this MacBook is so light and so slim is because they are using SSD, okay, solid state drive. Okay, right. Over here, I think we missed a point. It says SSDs also have no moving parts, and upgrading to one is a great way to speed up your computer and make it more resilient. Okay, because SSD has a high read-write speed, so your computer becomes fast. And next, it has no moving parts. Okay, so you shaking your laptop, moving your laptop this way, that way, will not be affecting your SSD. Okay, so I hope so far so good. I hope it's making sense over here. Over here, we have a question that is from the 2021 past paper. Okay. Kay makes copies of her work files. One reason magnetic tape is used for this is because it can store more data than other storage media. Okay. Explain one other reason why magnetic tape is a good choice. Now, in this presentation, we did not speak about magnetic tape. Okay, we only spoke about magnetic discs. Okay, so let me quickly show you a picture of magnetic tapes. Okay, they are like cassettes, for example. Okay, so magnetic tapes, yes. So these are what you call magnetic tapes. Okay, and these generally have a large storage capacity. They have a large storage capacity, but there is also a problem, which is this uses something called sequential access, which means you have to go in a particular order to access the data. You can't directly jump to a specific point. Now, when you have a pen drive, say for example, you have a movie stored on a pen drive, you can open up the movie and you can directly jump to the 30th minute. You can do that. But when you use a magnetic tape, you cannot do that. You have to go through the entire 29 minutes to get to the 30th minute. Okay, that's what we call sequential access. Okay. So now that can be a problem because you have to go through the entire 29 minutes to get to the 30-minute. That can be a problem, but that can also be a good choice. That can also be a safety protection because you look, explain one other reason magnetic tape is a good choice. You can say, since magnetic tapes have only sequential access, it will allow Kay to go through her files from the beginning until the end. Okay, she'll be able to go from the beginning until the end. She will be able to go in a proper order and access her files. Okay, so the sequential access, it can be a problem, but it can also be a huge benefit. Okay, so if you look at what the marking scheme says, you can say they have given completely different answers, not what I said. They have said it can be rewritten, so it can be reused. You can also mention that it is removable portable, meaning it can be stored offsite or in a secure location. You can also mention that. It is protected from hazards or thefts because it can be removed. It can be produced, it can be protected. Yeah. So you can remove it and keep it in a much secure location. So like basically 0.2 and 0.3 are pretty much the same. But even what I said about sequential access, it can be a problem. And most people do not like magnetic tapes because of sequential access. But then you can also use it in an advantageous way. You can say when she uses, since magnetic tapes have sequential access, Karen will be able to go through her work in order. She will not be, directly jumping to a specific point. She will have to go through in order when it comes to accessing her work files. Okay. Right. The next question over here, it says, this is also from the 2021 past paper. It says, give two types of peripheral storage media. Guys, be very careful. Storage media that the tablet could use. So storage media, you can talk about flash memory, you can talk about online storage or cloud storage. Okay, we haven't mentioned it in this chapter, but in the later chapters, cloud storage will be appearing. So cloud storage is where the files are not stored on your local storage, they are stored over the internet. You can also talk about what do you call this flash memory you mentioned. We can also talk about magnetic disk technology. Okay, magnetic disk can also be used with the tablet. Okay, so if you look over here, they have mentioned magnetic disk, flash, optical disk, magnetic tapes, cloud storage, all that have been accepted. Okay, but remember guys, if you put CD, DVD, look here, reference to storage, do not accept reference to storage devices. So if you put CD, DVD, pen drives, it will not be accepted because they have clearly said storage media. Okay. Right. There is another question which says Howard sells his old hard disk drive to Steve. Complete the table by ranking these storage devices in order of their read-write speed. So from these three, the fastest read-write speed will belong to SSD, solid state drive. Second, we would have hard disk drive. And then the slowest would definitely be the optical disk drive. Okay, right. So here also they have given the same thing. Describe two factors that affect the read-write speed of a hard disk drive. Okay, so two factors, then you will have to come back to this slide and you will have to talk about the parts. Okay, so the question, let's go through the question again, that affect the read-write speed. Okay, so definitely spindle is very, very important. Okay, the faster the spindle rotates, the faster the spindle rotates, you can say, for example, the faster the spindle rotates, the more data that can be read and written to. Okay, the faster the spindle rotates, because when the spindle rotates, the platters will rotate. Okay, so the faster the spindle rotates, the more revolutions per minute, the more data that can be read and written to. Okay, another thing is something called the read-write head. Okay, so the read-write head is actually taking the data and giving the data, taking the data, giving the data. Okay, so these read-write head, how fast is it reading the data? How fast is it writing the data to the platter? Okay, this also matters. Okay, sometimes there's a small delay when it takes and when it sends. Okay, the delay is what we call latency. So you can mention that. You can also say, you can simply say how fast the read-write head moves in receiving data and, sorry, in reading data and writing data to the platters. You can mention it that way, or you can simply say how much of a delay is there from the read-write head receiving data and writing data to the platters. Okay, you can put your answer that way. I'll also show you the marking scheme answers. I'll also show you the marking scheme answers, which is over here. Mechanical process, latency. So latency is referring to the read-write head. Okay, read-write head again they have mentioned. So they have said you have to describe any of these points. Okay, any of these points you have to be able to explain it. Okay, they are given an example, the latency of the read-write head, like I told you. Okay, how much of a delay is there when it receives and gives it. And then the revolutions per minute here over here, RPM, how fast is the spindle rotating? Because the faster the spindle rotates, the more data that can be taken from the platters. Okay. There's another question from the 2020 past paper, which is an MCQ question. Which one of these uses magnetic media? Okay, magnetic media. So it would definitely be a hard disk. Okay. From another 2020, from the same 2020 past paper, which one of these is a type of storage media? Storage media. Okay, so you have CD drive, you have magnetic tape, you have RAM, and you have SSD. Okay, so when we go through all these, the answer will be which one of these is a type of storage media? So our answer is going to be magnetic tapes, isn't it? Okay, so moving on then. So there's another question as well that comes from the 2021 past paper. So they have told us to complete the labeling of this image of a storage device. Okay, so this is, when they say storage device, immediately you should understand that this is a hard disk, the internal structure of a hard disk. So over here, part one would definitely be the platter. Okay, so underneath this, you will have other platters as well. Number two is going to be your spindle. So when this rotates, the platter rotates. And number three is going to be your read-write arm. Okay, so this is what takes data from the platters and gives data to the platter. Okay, so here they have mentioned it. Next, there's another one which says the game is stored on a DVD-R. So DVD-R means read only. You can only read data from it. You cannot make any changes to it. Explain why the game does not require rewritable optical storage media. So they're asking, why isn't it RW? Why is it only R? So you can very simply say the game is not going to be installed on the DVD, right? We take only the setup from the DVD. The setup is only taken from the DVD. Okay, and thereafter the files are installed on the user's local storage. Okay, so for example, if you're installing it on a computer, on a desktop, for example, the setup will be taken from a DVD, but the files will be stored on the computer's local storage. Which will most probably be a hard disk, or it might be an SSD. Okay, so there is no need for us to change anything in the DVD. So DVD does not need to be RW. Okay, I hope it makes sense what I'm saying. I'll just repeat myself again. So in the DVD, you will have the setup. The setup will be taken and it will be installed on the user's local storage, which will be the hard disk most probably, or an SSD. Okay, the files will be installed on the user's local storage. Okay, there will be no changes made to the DVD. Okay, so the DVD does not need to be RW. It being DVD-R is more than enough. Okay. I'll just show you what the marking scheme is also saying. So the marking scheme is also telling you pretty much the same thing. Okay. So the game progress is stored on the hard disk or the SSD or the cloud, whichever the user is using. Okay. Developer does not require the data on the DVD to be updated because this is done on local storage. Okay. So updating of game and all doesn't happen on the DVD. It happens on your local storage. Okay. Right. So with that, guys, we have come to the end of secondary storage as well. Okay. So now computer memory is completed. Okay. We have now completed computer memory. Now, the next thing that's remaining is the processor. Okay. This is an extremely powerful device in your computer, extremely busy device in your computer. Okay. So in our next video, we'll go through the functions of your computer's processor. Okay. See you guys in the next video.